I pulled into my parents' driveway expecting to see maybe 3 or 4 cars for what my mother Patricia had described as a quiet little family dinner to welcome my 3-week-old daughter Emily home. Instead, I counted 27 vehicles lining both sides of the street with more parked on the neighboring lawns. My heart sank as I unbuckled Emily from her car seat, wondering what kind of chaos awaited us inside. The moment I stepped through the front door, my jaw dropped. 81 people filled every corner of the house I had purchased for my parents 2 years ago. Professional caterers bustled through the kitchen, carrying elaborate platters. A DJ spun music from the living room, and a massive bounce house dominated the entire backyard. But what stopped me cold was the enormous banner stretched across the main hallway that read, "Welcome Baby Emily," in glittering letters that must have cost hundreds of dollars. "Surprise!" my mother shrieked, appearing beside me with arms spread wide and a triumphant grin plastered across her face. "Isn't this wonderful? We wanted Emily's homecoming to be absolutely perfect." I stared at the spectacle surrounding us, calculating the obvious expense in my head. The catering alone had to cost thousands, not to mention the entertainment decorations and what appeared to be an open bar serving top-shelf liquor to distant relatives I barely recognized. "Mom, how did you afford all this?" I asked, bouncing Emily gently as she began to fuss from the overwhelming noise and crowd. Patricia's laugh sent ice through my veins. "Oh, honey, we used your work bonus. All $12,800 went toward family joy. This is what bringing people together looks like." The room seemed to tilt around me as her words sank in. My bonus. The money I had earned through months of overtime and extra projects at the financial consulting firm. The money I had been saving for Emily's future, for her college fund, for our security. "How did you access my account?" I managed to ask, keeping my voice level despite the fury building in my chest. My father Frank appeared from the crowd, clapping me on the shoulder with the casual confidence of someone who felt completely justified in his actions. "We kept copies of your banking information from when we helped you with your taxes last year, sweetheart. Figured you wouldn't mind contributing to such a beautiful celebration for your daughter." I looked around at the chaos, at the strangers eating expensive food and drinking premium alcohol with my money, at the elaborate decorations that would be thrown away tomorrow, at the professional photographer capturing every moment of this violation of my trust and financial security. "Noted," I said quietly, my voice barely audible over the party noise. As I walked through the crowded house with Emily pressed against my chest, the full scope of my parents' financial betrayal began to unfold before my eyes. My 22-year-old brother Jake bounded up to me with the enthusiasm of someone who had just won the lottery, completely oblivious to my growing horror. "Chanel, check out what Mom and Dad got me." He held up the latest gaming console along with what appeared to be every new release game available. "They said you wanted to celebrate Emily by upgrading everyone's lives. This whole setup costs like $3,000, but it's so worth it." Before I could respond, my 19-year-old sister Madison materialized beside us, practically glowing as she showed off an elaborate diamond tennis bracelet that caught the light from every angle. "Look what arrived yesterday. Mom said you insisted on getting me something special, since I'm going to be the best aunt ever. The jewelry store said this piece is worth $4,500. My stomach dropped further as I began to understand that my bonus was just the beginning. I forced a smile while internally calculating the mounting expenses. "That's beautiful, Madison, really sparkly." Aunt Carol swept over with her husband, Uncle Stephen, both clutching expensive cocktails and beaming with gratitude. "Chanel, darling, we cannot thank you enough for funding our Disney World vacation last month. 2 weeks at the Grand Floridian Resort was absolutely magical. The kids are still talking about it." Uncle Stephen nodded enthusiastically, his face flushed from what appeared to be his 4th or 5th premium whiskey. $8,000 for the whole family trip, but completely worth every penny. You're incredibly generous, especially for someone so young. Not many 28-year-olds would spend that kind of money on extended family. I felt the blood drain from my face as more relatives approached, each eager to share their gratitude for expenses I had never approved or even known about. Cousin Jennifer thanked me for the new laptop for her college courses. Cousin Brian praised my generosity for covering his car repair bills. Aunt Susan gushed about the spa weekend I had apparently funded for her birthday celebration. While pretending to listen to their appreciation, I discreetly pulled out my phone and checked my banking app. What I saw made my knees nearly buckle. My checking account, which should have contained over $15,000, showed a balance of $837. My savings account, carefully built over 3 years to reach $18,000, now displayed $412. Patricia noticed me staring at my phone and approached with that same smug expression. "Oh, honey, don't worry about the numbers right now. This is about family, about celebrating Emily, about showing everyone how successful our daughter has become. You owe us this much after everything we've done for you." Her words hit me like physical blows. I owe you. Of course, who supported you through your difficult pregnancy when you were too stubborn to tell us who Emily's father is, who let you stay in this beautiful house rent-free for 2 years, who helped you get through college and build your career. Family investments require family returns, sweetheart. I looked around at the elaborate party at my relatives, enjoying expensive food and drinks, at the professional entertainment, at the massive floral arrangements that probably cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month. Every detail represented money stolen from Emily's future, from our security, from the careful financial planning I had worked so hard to build. My phone buzzed with a banking alert. Another transaction. Another withdrawal I had not authorized. Another piece of my financial independence being stripped away by the people who were supposed to protect and support me. Noted. I repeated, my voice steady despite the earthquake of betrayal happening inside my chest. 20 minutes into this nightmare celebration, I excused myself to use the bathroom, needing a moment away from the chaos to process what I had discovered. As I walked down the hallway toward the guest bathroom, I heard my parents' voices coming from their bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and their conversation stopped me in my tracks. "The notary confirmed he can meet us tomorrow morning at 9, my father was saying in a low, conspiratorial tone. "Marcus owes me enough favors from our construction days that he'll backdate everything to make it look like Chanel transferred the house to us 3 months ago, right after Emily was born." My mother's voice carried a note of excitement that made my skin crawl. Perfect timing, too, since she's so emotional and exhausted from being a new mother. By the time she realizes what happened, the paperwork will already be filed with the county records office. There's no way she'll have the energy or resources to fight us legally, especially now that we've cleaned out most of her accounts. I pressed myself against the wall, holding Emily tighter as I strained to hear every word of their treachery. Marcus said, "Forging her signature will be simple since we have so many examples from the tax documents and bank paperwork she signed last year," Frank continued. "The deed transfer will show that she gifted us the property as gratitude for our help during her pregnancy and as preparation for Emily's future care." Patricia laughed, a sound that now seemed completely foreign to my ears. She always was too trusting, keeping all her important documents in that little fireproof box in her closet. Getting copies of everything we needed was easier than taking candy from a baby. "The best part is how we've positioned ourselves as the responsible family members, stepping up during her crisis. If she tries to claim we stole anything, we have months of documentation showing her erratic behavior and poor decision-making. Who's gonna believe an unstable single mother over concerned parents protecting their grandchild's interests?" My hands began to shake as I realized the full scope of their betrayal. This wasn't just about spending my money on a party. They were systematically stealing everything I had worked to build, using my own documents and information against me, and planning to leave me completely dependent on them. Whoa. Once we own the house legally, we can start the next phase. Patricia said, her voice dropping even lower. If she becomes too difficult to manage, we have options. That family court judge, Michelle Rodriguez, is very sympathetic to grandparents' rights cases, especially when there are concerns about parental fitness. Frank chuckled darkly. Amazing how convenient it is that Chanel's been so secretive about Emily's father. Makes her look unstable and irresponsible. Combined with her long work hours and obvious financial irresponsibility, we've got a solid case for emergency custody if needed. I felt like I was drowning in their words. Emergency custody. They were planning to take Emily away from me if I fought back against their financial theft. The house I had purchased thinking I was providing security for my family had become the foundation for their scheme to destroy my independence entirely. Emily stirred against my chest, making a soft cooing sound that reminded me why I had to stay strong. I took a slow, silent breath and continued listening. The timing couldn't be better, my mother continued. She's isolated, exhausted, financially depleted, and emotionally vulnerable. By the time she recovers enough to understand what's happening, we'll control everything that matters to her. I backed away from the door carefully, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and determination. They thought they had planned the perfect crime using my love for Emily and my trust in family against me. But they had made one crucial miscalculation. I wasn't the naive, trusting daughter they remembered. I was a financial consultant who specialized in fraud detection and asset protection. And I was about to show them exactly what that expertise looked like when directed against the people who had betrayed me most deeply. By 11:30 that night, after the last guest had finally left and my parents had collapsed into exhausted satisfaction over their successful party, I sat in the darkness of my old bedroom with Emily sleeping peacefully in her portable crib beside me. My laptop screen provided the only light as I began the methodical process of reclaiming my financial life. Using my professional access codes and specialized software from my consulting work, I started by examining every account that had been compromised. What I discovered was far worse than I had initially realized. My parents hadn't just accessed my checking and savings accounts. They had systematically infiltrated my entire financial identity. 3 credit cards had been opened in my name over the past 6 months each, with limits between $5,000 and $10,000. All were nearly maxed out with purchases I had never made. A second mortgage had been taken against the house, adding $68,000 in debt secured against the property I thought I owned free and clear. 2 personal loans totaling $22,000 had been approved using my income and credit information. My hands moved across the keyboard with a professional precision as I began the process of financial recovery. First, I called the fraud hotlines for each bank and credit company, reporting unauthorized access and requesting immediate account freezes. Then, I initiated the process of reversing every transaction I had not personally authorized. The credit card companies were surprisingly helpful once I provided my professional credentials and explained the situation. As a certified fraud investigator myself, I knew exactly which documentation they needed and how to present the case for maximum impact. Within 2 hours, I had successfully frozen all the fraudulent accounts and initiated chargeback procedures for over $37,000 in unauthorized purchases. But as I worked, something kept nagging at me. The level of access my parents had achieved seemed too sophisticated for their limited technical skills. They had known exactly which accounts to target, which passwords to use, and how to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts. That's when I decided to run a security scan on my personal devices. What I found made my blood run cold. Sophisticated spyware had been installed on my laptop, my phone, and my tablet. The software was tracking every keystroke, every password, every financial transaction I made. But the installation dates showed that this had been happening for 8 months, not 6. They had been monitoring my digital life since before Emily was even born. The spyware signature led me to my cousin Derek, who worked in cybersecurity and had helped me set up my home network last year when I moved into the house. He had used his legitimate access to install monitoring software that allowed my parents to watch my every financial move in real time. I felt a chill run through me as I realized how completely they had invaded my privacy. Every conversation with my doctor about Emily's development, every email with my employer about maternity leave policies, every online purchase, every bank transaction, every digital footprint of my life had been visible to them for months. But their surveillance system was about to become their downfall. Using my cybersecurity training, I began to trace the data flows and identify every device that had accessed my information. The spyware had created detailed logs of every person who had viewed my financial data, complete with timestamps and location information. My parents had been checking my accounts multiple times daily, planning their thefts with military precision. More importantly, the spyware had also been monitoring their own devices, creating an evidentiary trail that would be admissible in both civil and criminal court. Every planning conversation they had conducted via text or email, every fraudulent transaction they had researched, every step of their conspiracy had been automatically documented by their own surveillance system. As I compiled the evidence, Emily stirred in her crib, making the soft, murmuring sounds that meant she would wake for her feeding soon. I looked at her peaceful face and felt a surge of protective determination that surprised me with its intensity. My parents thought they had trapped me in a web of financial dependence and legal vulnerability. Instead, they had created the evidence that would destroy them completely, and I was just getting started. The next morning, I woke to find my parents gone and Emily's diaper bag suspiciously rummaged through. While feeding Emily her bottle, I checked the small zippered pocket where I always kept her important documents. My heart sank as I discovered that Emily's original birth certificate, her social security card, and her hospital identification records had vanished. Panic rising in my chest, I immediately called the county records office to report the theft and request replacement documents. The clerk, Nancy Williams, delivered news that made my worst fears seem insignificant by comparison. "Miss Patterson, I show here that your parents submitted a petition for emergency guardianship of your daughter yesterday afternoon at 4:15. They've also filed a motion claiming you're suffering from severe postpartum psychosis and are unable to provide adequate care for the child." The phone nearly slipped from my trembling hand. "That's completely false. I'm perfectly fine and Emily is healthy and well cared for. According to the documentation they provided, you've been exhibiting erratic behavior, making poor financial decisions, and showing signs of mental instability since the birth. They have medical records, witness statements, and photographs supporting their claims. Medical records I had never authorized, witness statements from people who had been coached, photographs taken without my knowledge or consent. They've requested an emergency hearing for this Thursday at 2 o'clock. You should receive official notification by courier today, but I wanted to give you advance warning since the time frame for response is very limited in emergency custody cases." After hanging up, I immediately drove to my pediatrician's office with Emily. Dr. Margaret Foster had been monitoring Emily's development since birth and knew both of us well. When I explained what was happening, her face darkened with professional concern. "Chanel, I need you to know that someone claiming to be your mother called our office 3 days ago requesting Emily's complete medical file. When we refused due to patient privacy laws, she became very aggressive and threatened to file complaints about our care quality." Dr. Foster pulled Emily's chart and showed me detailed notes about every visit we had made. "Your parenting has been exemplary. Emily is developing perfectly. You've followed every recommendation and you've shown no signs whatsoever of postpartum depression or psychosis. In fact, you've been one of the most prepared and competent new mothers I've seen in 15 years of practice. Would you be willing to provide written testimony about my mental state and Emily's care?" Absolutely. What your parents are attempting is medical fraud, and I won't allow false psychiatric claims to be used against one of my patients. I'll prepare a comprehensive evaluation documenting your excellent mental health and parenting capabilities. Feeling somewhat reassured, I returned home to find my father waiting in the kitchen with a stack of legal documents spread across the table. His expression was a mixture of fake concern and barely concealed satisfaction. Chanel, honey, we need to talk about Emily's future. This whole situation has become very concerning for the entire family. I sat down across from him, keeping my expression neutral while Emily dozed in my arms. What situation? Frank pulled out a folder containing what appeared to be medical reports, photographs, and sworn statements. We've been documenting some troubling behavior patterns since Emily was born. The erratic spending, the secrecy about her father, the long work hours, the emotional outbursts. We're worried that you're not in a position to provide the stability that Emily needs. He showed me photographs that had clearly been taken without my knowledge. Pictures of me looking tired while changing Emily's diaper. Images of me appearing frustrated while trying to soothe her crying. Photos of our bedroom showing what they characterized as disorganized living conditions, but which were simply the normal chaos of life with a newborn. These witness statements are from family members who've observed concerning behavior during recent visits. Frank continued, pointing to a thick stack of affidavits. Everyone agrees that you seem overwhelmed and unable to cope with the responsibilities of single motherhood. I flipped through the statements and recognized signatures from relatives who had attended yesterday's party, people who had enjoyed expensive food and entertainment paid for with my stolen money were now swearing that I was mentally unfit to raise my daughter. The court hearing is scheduled for Thursday. We've already retained attorney Thomas Walsh to represent Emily's best interests in this matter. He specializes in grandparents' rights cases and has an excellent track record of protecting children from unstable home environments. Frank leaned back in his chair with the confidence of someone who believed he held all the cards. Of course, if you're willing to acknowledge that you need family support and agree to some reasonable arrangements regarding Emily's care and your financial management, we might be able to resolve this without involving the courts. The threat was clear: submit to their control completely or lose Emily forever. I looked down at my daughter's peaceful face and felt something crystallize inside me. They thought they had planned the perfect trap, using my love for Emily as leverage to force my cooperation with their theft and manipulation. They had no idea that their overconfidence was about to become the foundation of their complete destruction. I need some time to think about this, I said quietly. Frank smiled with the satisfaction of someone who believed he had already won. Of course, sweetheart. Take all the time you need. The hearing is Thursday at 2:00. That evening, while my parents believed I was upstairs having an emotional breakdown over their ultimatum, I was actually conducting the most important research of my career. Using my professional databases and investigative tools, I began tracing the connections between all the family members who had signed affidavits against me. What I discovered revealed a conspiracy far more coordinated than I had imagined. My Aunt Carol hadn't just enjoyed the Disney World vacation I had unknowingly funded. She had been recruited as a key witness 3 months earlier, long before Emily was even born. Her affidavit claimed that during my pregnancy, I had exhibited concerning mood swings and inappropriate anger toward family members who were only trying to help. Uncle Stephen's statement described incidents that had supposedly occurred during family gatherings, where I had been secretive about my finances and hostile toward questions about Emily's father. He painted a picture of someone who was deliberately isolating herself and her unborn child from family support systems. Cousin Jennifer, who had thanked me just yesterday for the laptop I had never purchased, swore that I had made troubling comments about not wanting family interference in Emily's upbringing. Her statement suggested that I viewed my relatives as threats rather than support systems. But the most damaging affidavit came from my grandmother's neighbor, Helen Martinez, who claimed to have witnessed me having angry outbursts during visits to my grandmother's house. According to her statement, I had been increasingly agitated and paranoid during my pregnancy, often making irrational accusations about family members. The problem with Helen's statement was that my grandmother had been living in an assisted care facility for 2 years. The house Helen claimed to have observed me visiting had been sold 18 months ago. Her entire affidavit was fabricated, but it had been notarized and submitted as legitimate testimony. I began cross-referencing the dates and details in each statement with my actual whereabouts and activities. Using my calendar, work records, and medical appointments, I could prove that half the incidents described in these affidavits had occurred when I was either at work at doctor's appointments or in completely different locations. More importantly, I discovered that all 6 family members had been contacted by the same person to request their statements, Thomas Walsh, the attorney, who was supposedly representing Emily's best interests. Walsh had provided each of them with detailed scripts about what to include in their testimony, coaching them on specific language and incidents that would support the mental instability narrative. But Walsh had made a crucial mistake. His law firm's billing records, which I accessed through my professional fraud investigation credentials, showed that my parents had been paying his fees for 4 months. They had retained him in May, a full month before Emily was born, to plan this custody grab. The billing details revealed the scope of their preparation. Walsh had charged them for meetings with a corrupt social worker named Diana Thompson, consultations with a psychiatrist willing to diagnose mental illness without examination, and coordination with a network of witnesses who specialized in providing false testimony in family court cases. This wasn't just about stealing my money or manipulating my family relationships. My parents had been planning to take Emily away from me since before she was even born, using a corrupt legal network that had apparently helped them destroy other families in similar situations. As I documented this evidence, my phone buzzed with a text message from my cousin Derek. "Hey, wanted to check in on you after yesterday's party. Mom said you seemed pretty overwhelmed with everything. Let me know if you need any tech support or help with anything." The casual tone made my skin crawl. Derek was fishing for information, trying to determine if I had discovered the spyware he had installed on my devices. He had no idea that I had not only found his surveillance software, but had turned it into a comprehensive monitoring system that was now documenting every move my family made. I typed back, "Thanks for checking. Everything's fine, just adjusting to life with Emily. Talk soon." What Derek didn't know was that his own devices were now compromised. The same professional-grade software I use for corporate fraud investigations was now tracking every communication between the conspirators, creating a real-time map of their continued planning and coordination. Over the next 2 hours, I watched as text messages and phone calls flew between my parents, Walsh, the corrupt social worker, and various family members. They were coordinating their stories for the Thursday hearing, making sure their testimonies would align perfectly to present the most damaging possible picture of my mental state and parenting capacity. But their communications also revealed something that gave me hope. They were scared. Multiple messages referenced concerns about what Chanel might do if she gets suspicious, and strategies for keeping her from finding out too much before Thursday. They knew that their plan required me to remain ignorant and passive. They had built their entire strategy around the assumption that I would be too overwhelmed, too isolated, and too emotionally devastated to mount an effective defense. They were about to learn how catastrophically wrong they were. The next morning brought a phone call that nearly shattered my remaining composure. Rebecca Thompson, my supervisor at Henderson Financial Consulting, was calling with news that made my parents' previous betrayals seem almost insignificant by comparison. Chanel. I'm so sorry to hear about your condition. Your mother called yesterday and explained everything about the postpartum psychosis diagnosis. She faxed over the medical documentation, and we want you to know that your job will be protected under the Family Medical Leave Act while you get the treatment you need. My hands began trembling as Rebecca's words sank in. What medical documentation? I haven't been diagnosed with anything. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Your mother provided reports from Dr. Elizabeth Warren at Regional Psychiatric Associates, indicating that you've been experiencing severe postpartum depression with psychotic features. The documentation shows that you're currently unable to work and require immediate family intervention and possible hospitalization. Dr. Elizabeth Warren. I had never heard that name in my life, but somehow she had provided detailed psychiatric reports about my mental condition. Rebecca, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I have not been diagnosed with any psychiatric condition. I have not seen any psychiatrist. Whatever documentation my mother provided is completely fraudulent. Chanel, I understand that mental health issues can be difficult to accept, but your mother was very thorough in explaining the situation. She mentioned that denial and paranoia are common symptoms of your current condition. She also said that you might try to claim the medical reports are fake as part of your illness. The trap was perfect. Any attempt I made to deny the false diagnosis would be interpreted as further evidence of my mental instability. My parents had positioned themselves as concerned family members, trying to help while painting me as someone whose own statements couldn't be trusted. Your mother also mentioned that you've been making concerning statements about family members stealing from you, which aligns with the paranoid delusions described in Dr. Warren's report. She's arranged for you to receive inpatient treatment starting Friday right after some legal matters involving your daughter are resolved. Inpatient treatment. They were planning to have me involuntarily committed to a psychiatric facility immediately after the custody hearing. Even if I somehow managed to fight the custody petition, I would be locked away and unable to care for Emily or defend myself further. Rebecca, please don't make any decisions about my employment status until we can meet in person. I can prove that these medical reports are fraudulent. I'm sorry, Chanel, but based on the medical documentation and your mother's concerns, I've already initiated the process to temporarily transfer your active cases to other consultants. Your mother mentioned that you might become agitated or even violent if confronted about your condition, so I think it's best if we handle everything through family representatives for now. After hanging up, I immediately called Regional Psychiatric Associates and asked to speak with Dr. Elizabeth Warren. The receptionist informed me that no doctor by that name had ever worked at their facility. When I requested copies of any reports issued under my name, they confirmed that they had no records of me as a patient. The medical documentation my parents had provided to my employer was completely fabricated, but it had been crafted professionally enough to convince my supervisor that I was genuinely mentally ill and potentially dangerous. I realized that my parents had been planning this aspect of their scheme just as carefully as a custody petition. By destroying my employment, they were eliminating my financial resources to fight them legally while also supporting their narrative that I was too unstable to hold a job or care for a child. But their employment sabotage had also created an opportunity I could exploit. As a senior consultant at Henderson Financial, I had developed relationships with attorneys throughout the region who specialized in white-collar crime and corporate fraud. My professional reputation and track record would carry weight with people who understood financial investigation and evidence analysis. More importantly, my employer's human resources department had strict protocols for handling medical information and employee leave requests. The fraudulent documentation my parents had submitted created liability issues for the company that would require thorough investigation and potential legal action. I made 3 phone calls that afternoon that would change everything. The first was to attorney Jonathan Rivera, whom I had worked with on several major fraud cases. Jonathan specialized in financial crimes and had extensive experience dealing with family-related theft and identity fraud. When I explained the situation, his response was immediate and decisive. Chanel, what you're describing isn't just family drama. This is organized financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The fact that they forged medical documents to interfere with your employment adds federal charges related to wire fraud and mail fraud. The second call was to FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen, whom I had assisted on a major corporate embezzlement case the previous year. Agent Chen listened carefully to my summary of events and asked me to send her all the documentation I had gathered. The pattern you're describing matches several cases we've been investigating involving corrupt attorneys who help families steal assets from successful children. If Thomas Walsh is involved, we've been trying to build a case against him for 2 years. The third call was to my company's legal department, where I spoke with General Counsel David Martinez about the fraudulent medical documentation that had been used to manipulate my employment status. Chanel, using fake medical reports to interfere with someone's employment, constitutes several felonies. We'll need to file reports with both local police and federal authorities. This also creates potential liability for our company if we acted on fraudulent information, so we'll be conducting our own investigation. By the end of the day, I had transformed from an isolated victim into the center of a growing criminal investigation. My parents thought they were systematically destroying my life, but they were actually creating the evidence that would send them to federal prison. Emily slept peacefully in her crib as I organized files and prepared for the battle that would determine both our futures. Tomorrow was Thursday. Tomorrow was the custody hearing that was supposed to complete my family's destruction of my independence. Instead, it was going to be the beginning of their complete downfall. Wednesday evening brought the most crucial meeting of my life. Attorney Jonathan Rivera's office felt like a war room as we spread evidence across his conference table, preparing for a legal battle that would determine not just Emily's future, but whether my parents would face federal prison time for their elaborate fraud scheme. Chanel, I need you to understand something before we proceed, Jonathan said, reviewing the files I had compiled. What your family has done goes far beyond typical civil disputes. We're looking at multiple federal felonies, organized conspiracy, and what appears to be a pattern of similar crimes involving other families. He pulled out a thick folder containing information that made my blood run cold. After you called yesterday, I contacted FBI Agent Chen and discovered that Thomas Walsh has been under federal investigation for 18 months. Your case isn't isolated. Walsh has been helping families steal from successful children using exactly the same methods your parents employed. Jonathan showed me case files detailing 6 other families where Walsh had facilitated similar schemes. Adult children with substantial assets had been targeted by their own relatives using fraudulent mental health claims, forged documents, and coordinated witness testimony. In each case, the victims had lost everything, while their families gained control of homes, businesses, and financial accounts. The FBI has been trying to build a comprehensive case against Walsh's operation, but they needed current victims who were willing to cooperate and provide real-time evidence. Agent Chen asked if you would consider becoming a cooperating witness in their investigation. The request was both terrifying and empowering. By agreeing to help the FBI, I would be placing myself at the center of a federal investigation that could take months or years to resolve. But I would also be part of taking down a criminal network that had destroyed multiple families. What would that involve? Tomorrow's custody hearing becomes an opportunity to gather evidence. You would wear a recording device to capture any admissions or coordination between Walsh, your parents, and their witnesses. The FBI would also monitor all communications between the conspirators leading up to and during the hearing. Jonathan explained that Agent Chen had already obtained federal warrants to monitor Walsh's phone calls, emails, and office communications. The investigation had revealed that Walsh worked with a network of corrupt professionals, including social workers, psychiatrists, and notaries who specialized in creating false evidence for family court cases. Your parents paid Walsh over $15,000 to orchestrate this custody grab, but his billing records show similar payments from the other victim families. We estimate that Walsh's operation has stolen over $2 million from families across 3 states over the past 5 years. The scope of the criminal enterprise was staggering. My parents weren't just thieves. They were participants in an organized network that systematically destroyed families for financial gain. Here's what we know about tomorrow's hearing. Jonathan continued pulling out Walsh's internal communications that the FBI had intercepted. Walsh has coached your family members to provide specific testimony designed to support involuntary psychiatric commitment. The goal isn't just to take Emily away temporarily. They want you declared mentally incompetent so they can gain control of all your remaining assets permanently. The intercepted communications revealed that my parents had already signed contracts with Walsh to transfer my house, my retirement accounts, and my professional credentials to their control once I was committed. They were planning to liquidate everything I had worked to build and disappear with the proceeds. But Walsh made a crucial mistake. He documented everything in emails and billing records that the FBI now has access to. Tomorrow's hearing will be recorded by federal agents, and any false testimony will result in immediate perjury charges. Jonathan handed me a small recording device that looked like a standard fitness tracker. This will capture everything said in the courtroom and any private conversations before or after the hearing. Agent Chen will be monitoring from a van outside the courthouse, ready to intervene if necessary. As we reviewed the legal strategy, I felt a mixture of terror and anticipation. My parents had spent months planning what they believed would be my complete destruction. Instead, they had created the evidence that would send them to federal prison while revealing a criminal network that had been operating with impunity for years. "There's one more thing you need to know," Jonathan said, his expression growing serious. "The FBI investigation has revealed that your parents have been in contact with other criminal networks beyond Walsh's operation. They've been researching ways to assume Emily's identity for financial fraud purposes and exploring options for making you disappear permanently if the legal approach didn't work." The implications of his words hit me like physical blows. My parents hadn't just been planning to steal my money and take my daughter. They had been prepared to eliminate me entirely if I became too difficult to control. That's why tomorrow is so critical. Once they realize that their plan has failed and that federal agents are involved, they may become desperate and dangerous. Agent Chen will have backup teams positioned throughout the courthouse area. I looked down at Emily sleeping peacefully in her car seat, completely unaware that her future was about to be determined by a legal battle that would either secure her safety or place us both in mortal danger. I'll do whatever it takes to protect her and stop them from hurting other families. Jonathan smiled with the satisfaction of an attorney who knew he was about to deliver justice to people who had evaded consequences for far too long. Tomorrow, they're going to discover that their perfect crime was actually perfect evidence for their own convictions. Thursday morning arrived with the weight of everything I had discovered pressing down on me like a physical force. As I prepared Emily for what my parents believed would be our final day together, the small recording device hidden beneath my fitness tracker felt like both a lifeline and a weapon. At 10:30 exactly, as Agent Chen had predicted, my mother knocked on my bedroom door with an expression of fake concern that now seemed transparently manipulative. "Honey, your father and I think we should have a family meeting before we go to the courthouse today. There are some things we need to discuss privately." I followed Patricia downstairs to the living room, where Frank waited with the satisfied posture of someone who believed he had already won. The space that had hosted Monday's elaborate party now felt like a courtroom where I was about to be sentenced. Chanel, sweetheart, we want you to know how much we love you and Emily. Patricia began settling into her favorite chair with the practiced ease of someone delivering a rehearsed speech. What's happening today is for both your protection and Emily's future security. Frank leaned forward with his most paternal expression. We've been watching you struggle since Emily was born, and it's become clear that single motherhood is more than you can handle. The financial irresponsibility, the emotional outbursts, the paranoid thinking about family members, it's all evidence that you need professional help. I maintained my composure while the recording device captured every word. What kind of help? Dr. Warren has arranged for you to be admitted to Riverside Psychiatric Hospital immediately after today's hearing. Patricia explained with the tone of someone discussing vacation plans. It's a beautiful facility where you can get the intensive treatment you need for your postpartum psychosis. Frank nodded enthusiastically. The great news is that while you're getting better, Emily will be safe and well cared for with family who can provide the stability she needs. We've already set up the nursery in the guest room and arranged for everything she could possibly need. What about my job, my house, my financial accounts? Patricia's smile became predatory. Oh, honey, you don't need to worry about any of that practical stuff while you're focusing on your recovery. We'll handle all the business details through the power of attorney arrangements that Thomas Walsh prepared. Power of attorney arrangements. Frank pulled out a folder containing documents I had never seen before. These were prepared based on the medical recommendations from Dr. Warren. Since you're not mentally competent to make financial or legal decisions right now, we'll be managing all your affairs until you're fully recovered. He showed me papers that would transfer control of my bank accounts, my house deed, my investment portfolios, and even my professional licenses to my parents. The documents were dated 3 weeks earlier with what appeared to be my signature authorizing everything. Of course, once you're better and ready to resume normal life, we can reassess these arrangements, Patricia added with the false reassurance of someone who had no intention of ever returning control. How long do you expect my treatment to take? Frank and Patricia exchanged a look that confirmed my worst fears. Dr. Warren indicated that severe postpartum psychosis typically requires 18 to 24 months of intensive inpatient treatment, Frank said. But the most important thing is making sure you're completely stable before you try to take on parental responsibilities again. 2 years. They were planning to keep me locked away for 2 years while they liquidated everything I owned and established legal custody of Emily. By the time I would theoretically be released, Emily would barely remember me, and there would be nothing left of the life I had built. What happens if I don't agree to voluntary admission for treatment? Patricia's mask slipped slightly, revealing the cold calculation beneath her motherly concern. Sweetheart, after today's hearing, it won't be your choice anymore. Judge Rodriguez has already reviewed the medical evidence and witness statements. The court will order involuntary commitment if necessary. Frank leaned back with the confidence of someone whose plan was proceeding exactly as expected. The beautiful thing about this approach is that everyone benefits. Emily gets the stable family environment she deserves. You get the professional help you clearly need, and the family doesn't have to watch you destroy yourself and traumatize your daughter with your increasingly erratic behavior. Thomas Walsh has been amazing to work with. Patricia continued, apparently unable to resist bragging about their elaborate scheme. He explained exactly how to document your decline and coordinate the medical evaluations. Did you know that there are doctors who specialize in providing diagnoses for family court cases? Dr. Warren has helped dozens of families protect children from mentally unstable parents. Frank chuckled with satisfaction. The best part is how we've positioned everything. If you ever try to claim that we stole money or forged documents, it just looks like more paranoid delusions from someone who's mentally ill. Who's going to believe an unstable woman with a history of psychiatric hospitalization I felt a surge of satisfaction as I realized they were confessing to everything. The recording device was capturing detailed admissions of fraud conspiracy, document forgery, and medical fraud. They were so confident in their control over the situation that they felt completely safe revealing the full scope of their crimes. "I have to ask," I said carefully, "how did you get access to all my banking information and personal documents?" Patricia laughed with genuine amusement. "Oh, honey, Derek set up that monitoring software on your devices almost a year ago. We've been watching every move you make, every dollar you spend, every conversation you have. We knew about your pregnancy before you even told us." Frank's smile became genuinely proud. "Derek is such a clever boy. He designed the system so we could track everything in real time without you ever knowing. We've been planning this intervention since long before Emily was born." The recording device captured every word of their confession: unauthorized surveillance, identity theft, financial fraud conspiracy, and false imprisonment. They had just provided enough evidence to send themselves to federal prison for decades. The timing worked out perfectly, too. Patricia continued, apparently unable to stop herself from gloating. "Having Emily gave us the perfect leverage to make sure you cooperate. Even if you wanted to fight us, what mother would risk losing her child just to protect some money?" I looked at both my parents, these people who had given me life and raised me, who were now calmly explaining how they planned to destroy my future and steal my daughter. The recording device captured my final question. "And you really believe this is the right thing to do?" Frank's expression became almost paternal. "Chanel, sometimes parents have to make difficult decisions to protect their children from themselves. This is one of those times." At 11:45, we left for the courthouse. My parents chatted casually about their post-hearing plans while I sat in silence, holding Emily and knowing that I had just recorded the evidence that would expose their crimes to the world. They thought they were taking me to my surrender and defeat. Instead, they were driving themselves directly into the most devastating legal trap of their lives. At 12:15, just 45 minutes before the custody hearing was scheduled to begin, I implemented the most crucial part of Agent Chen's plan. While my parents waited confidently in the courthouse lobby, reviewing their false testimony one final time with Thomas Walsh, I called 911 from the courthouse bathroom. "This is an emergency. My 3-week-old daughter is having difficulty breathing, and I need immediate medical assistance at the county courthouse." Within minutes, paramedics arrived and confirmed what Dr. Foster and I had prearranged. Emily was displaying symptoms that required immediate medical evaluation and observation. As a precautionary measure, both Emily and I needed to be transported to Regional Medical Center for emergency assessment. My parents rushed over as the paramedics prepared Emily for transport, their faces showing what appeared to be genuine concern but which I now recognized as panic about their disrupted timeline. "What's happening?" Patricia demanded, reaching for Emily as if to take her from the paramedics. "Ma'am, we need to transport the baby and mother immediately for medical evaluation," the lead paramedic explained. "You can follow us to the hospital, but we cannot allow anyone else in the ambulance during emergency transport." Frank looked desperately toward Thomas Walsh, who was frantically making phone calls to determine how this development would affect their custody petition. The hearing could not proceed without Emily present, and any medical emergency would take precedence over family court matters. "We're going with you," Patricia announced, but the paramedic shook his head firmly. "Hospital policy restricts emergency room access to parents and legal guardians only during active medical situations involving minors. You'll need to wait in the family waiting area until the medical evaluation is complete." As the ambulance doors closed, I saw Walsh arguing with my parents about rescheduling strategies and damage control. Their perfect plan was already falling apart, and they had no idea that the real trap was just beginning. At the hospital, Dr. Helen Martinez was waiting exactly as Agent Chen had arranged. Dr. Martinez was not only a respected pediatrician, but also a trained forensic medical examiner who specialized in documenting evidence of child endangerment and family fraud cases. "Let's get Emily thoroughly examined and documented," Dr. Martinez said as we were brought into a private examination room. "We want comprehensive medical records showing her perfect health and your excellent care as her mother." Over the next 2 hours, Dr. Martinez conducted the most detailed pediatric examination I had ever seen. She documented Emily's weight-length reflexes and developmental markers. She photographed Emily's excellent condition and took detailed notes about her feeding schedule, sleep patterns, and overall care. More importantly, Dr. Martinez conducted a comprehensive evaluation of my mental state and parenting capabilities. Using standardized psychiatric assessment tools, she documented that I showed no signs whatsoever of postpartum depression, anxiety, psychosis, or any other mental health condition. "Chanel, I want you to understand something very important," Dr. Martinez said as she completed her documentation. "The medical reports that were supposedly prepared by Dr. Elizabeth Warren are not just fraudulent, they're criminally negligent. The symptoms and treatments described would actually be dangerous if applied to someone in your condition." She showed me copies of the false psychiatric reports my parents had submitted to my employer and the family court. These recommendations for involuntary commitment and psychiatric medication would constitute medical malpractice if any legitimate doctor had prescribed them. Whoever created these documents has detailed knowledge of psychiatric terminology, but no understanding of actual treatment protocols. Dr. Martinez's medical evaluation created official hospital records proving that both Emily and I were perfectly healthy, directly contradicting every claim in my parents' custody petition. More importantly, her documentation would be admissible in both family court and federal criminal court as expert testimony about the fraudulent nature of the psychiatric reports. While we were in the examination room, Agent Chen arrived dressed as a hospital social worker conducting routine follow-up on emergency pediatric cases. To any observer, her presence appeared completely normal and procedural. "The recording device captured everything perfectly," Agent Chen told me quietly, while Dr. Martinez finished her paperwork. "Your parents provided detailed confessions to multiple federal crimes. We have enough evidence now to arrest everyone involved in the conspiracy." She explained that the custody hearing had been postponed until Monday, due to Emily's medical emergency, giving the FBI time to coordinate arrests and gather additional evidence. Walsh had spent the afternoon frantically calling other members of his criminal network, unaware that all his communications were being monitored and recorded. "Your parents are currently at the hospital trying to convince the nursing staff that they should have access to Emily, despite not being listed as authorized visitors. Their behavior is being documented by hospital security as evidence of harassment and attempted interference with medical care." Agent Chen handed me a tablet showing real-time surveillance footage of my parents arguing with hospital staff, demanding access to Emily, and making increasingly aggressive threats about legal consequences. Their desperation was creating additional evidence of their attempts to control and manipulate the situation. "Tomorrow morning, we execute arrest warrants for your parents, Thomas Walsh, Dr. Elizabeth Warren, Derek, and 6 other members of their criminal network. The charges include federal conspiracy wire, fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, and medical fraud." As Emily slept peacefully in the hospital crib, surrounded by medical documentation, proving her perfect health and my excellent care, I realized that my parents' attempt to destroy my life had instead created the evidence that would protect us forever and bring justice to families they had already victimized. Their false emergency had become their real disaster. Tomorrow they would discover that their perfect crime was actually the perfect trap. Friday morning brought the most satisfying moment of this entire nightmare, while Emily and I were safely protected in the hospital. Under Agent Chen's supervision, my parents arrived at Thomas Walsh's office for what they believed would be the completion of their property theft. They had no idea that FBI agents were already positioned throughout the building ready to document their final crimes. Walsh's office was equipped with federal surveillance equipment that captured every word as my parents eagerly signed what they thought were the final documents transferring my house into their names. The forged deed transfer, the falsified notary acknowledgments, and the backdated ownership papers were all being recorded as evidence of federal crimes. This is perfect. Patricia's voice came through clearly on the FBI monitoring equipment. Once we own the house legally, Chanel will have no choice but to cooperate with our custody arrangement. She'll have nowhere else to go. Frank's laughter was equally incriminating. The best part is how we've used her own money to pay for stealing her property. Every dollar we spent on legal fees came directly from her accounts. She's literally funding her own destruction. Walsh appeared confident as he prepared the fraudulent notary acknowledgments. My associate Marcus has been doing this kind of work for 15 years. The county records office will never question the authenticity of these documents, especially with the 3-month backdating that makes everything appear legitimate. What none of them knew was that the house had never actually been in my name alone. 6 months earlier, as part of my work with the FBI on corporate fraud cases, Agent Chen had been added as a co-owner of the property to protect it from potential retaliation by criminals we were investigating. The deed they were attempting to forge was legally impossible to execute. At 9:47 that morning, Marcus, the corrupt notary, arrived at Walsh's office ready to complete the falsification process. He brought official notary stamps, pre-signed acknowledgement forms, and equipment for creating backdated documents that would appear completely legitimate to county records officials. "This is the easiest money I've made all year," Marcus bragged as he prepared his fraudulent paperwork. "Stealing property from children who think they're smarter than their parents never gets old." The FBI surveillance captured Marcus explaining his entire process for creating false legal documents, including techniques for aging paper-matching ink types and coordinating with corrupt records office employees who would process fraudulent filings without proper verification. But at 10:15, everything changed. Marcus attempted to access the county property database to verify the current ownership status before finalizing the transfer documents. What appeared on his computer screen made his face go completely white. "There's a problem," he announced, his voice cracking with sudden panic. "The property shows federal seizure status. It's been designated as evidence in an ongoing federal investigation." Walsh jumped up to look at the screen, his confidence evaporating as he read the official notices. "That's impossible. We've been monitoring this property for months. There's never been any indication of federal involvement." Frank and Patricia crowded around the computer, their faces showing the first signs of genuine fear I had ever seen from them. "What does this mean?" Patricia demanded. "It means," Marcus said, his hands shaking as he began packing up his equipment, "that attempting to transfer this property constitutes federal evidence, tampering, and obstruction of justice. If we proceed with this paperwork, we're looking at 20-year federal sentences." Walsh frantically began making phone calls to determine how the property had become involved in a federal case. What he discovered made the situation exponentially worse. The co-owner on the deed is FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen. Walsh announced, his voice barely audible. "The property has been under federal protection for 6 months as part of an ongoing financial crimes investigation." The room fell completely silent as the implications sank in. Every phone call they had made, every document they had prepared, every step of their conspiracy had been conducted while under active FBI surveillance. Marcus was the first to crack. "I'm out of here. This whole thing is a federal sting operation, and I'm not going to prison for property fraud." As Marcus fled the office, Patricia grabbed Walsh by the shoulders with desperate intensity. "Fix this. We've paid you $15,000 to handle everything." Walsh's response revealed the true scope of their legal catastrophe. "Mrs. Patterson, if the FBI has been monitoring this property for months, they've been monitoring everyone associated with it. That means they have recordings, financial records, communications, and evidence of everything we've done." Frank sank into a chair as the reality of their situation became clear. "How long do you think they've been watching us?" "Based on the federal seizure documentation," Walsh said, reviewing his computer screen with growing horror, "the investigation appears to have been active since May. That's before Emily was even born. The FBI surveillance captured my parents' complete emotional breakdown as they realized that their months of careful planning had been observed and documented by federal agents from the very beginning. Every crime they had committed, every law they had violated, every person they had corrupted had been recorded as evidence for their eventual prosecution." At 11:30, FBI agents entered Walsh's office with arrest warrants. Agent Chen's voice was calm and professional as she read the charges that would destroy their lives forever. "Thomas Walsh, Frank Patterson, Patricia Patterson, and Marcus Williams, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, property fraud, and obstruction of justice." The security cameras captured my parents' faces as handcuffs were placed on their wrists, and they were led away to begin what would likely be the rest of their lives in federal prison. Their perfect property theft had become the perfect evidence for their own convictions. The FBI's investigation into my parents' criminal network revealed a scope of fraud that shocked even experienced federal agents. What had appeared to be a targeted attack against me was actually just the most recent operation in a multi-state criminal enterprise that had been destroying families for over 5 years. Agent Chen called me at the hospital Friday afternoon with revelations that made my personal situation seem insignificant compared to the massive conspiracy they had uncovered. "Chanel, your parents weren't just stealing from you. They were running a sophisticated fraud operation that used your identity and financial credentials to scam dozens of people across 7 states. The federal investigation had uncovered a network of over 40 victims who had been defrauded using variations of the same tactics my parents had employed against me, using my professional reputation, my financial consulting credentials, and forged documentation bearing my signature. They had convinced relatives, neighbors, and family friends to invest in fake business opportunities and emergency loan schemes. The total amount stolen from all victims exceeds $850,000, Agent Chen explained. Your parents used your name and professional credentials to establish credibility with people who trusted them because they trusted you. The detailed financial records seized from Walsh's office revealed the sophisticated nature of their operation. They had created fake investment portfolios supposedly managed by my consulting firm. They had forged letters of recommendation using my professional letterhead. They had even created false documentation showing that I was personally guaranteeing various loans and investment opportunities. Your elderly neighbor, Mrs. Dorothy Williams, invested her entire life savings of $63,000 in what she thought was a retirement fund managed by you. Your father's brother, Robert, lost $47,000 in what he believed was a real estate investment opportunity that you had recommended. The victims' list was heartbreaking. Elderly relatives who had trusted my parents because of my professional success. Family friends who had invested retirement savings in fake opportunities. Young couples who had borrowed money, believing they were getting legitimate financial advice backed by my expertise. Most devastating was learning about my own grandmother's victimization. Grandma Rose had withdrawn $28,000 from her assisted living facility's trust account to invest in what my parents claimed was a special financial program I had designed for elderly family members. Your grandmother kept asking the nursing staff when she would start receiving the monthly returns your parents promised her. Agent Chen said, her voice heavy with anger. She's been worried that she did something wrong because the payments never came. The FBI had traced the stolen money through a complex network of accounts and shell companies that my parents had established using fraudulent business licenses and fake partnership agreements. Much of the money had been spent on luxury items, gambling, and payments to other members of Walsh's criminal network. We've identified 12 other families where Walsh used identical tactics to help relatives steal from successful children. The pattern is always the same: fake mental health claims, forged documents, fraudulent custody petitions, and systematic asset theft. Agent Chen showed me case files detailing similar situations across multiple states. A successful doctor in Texas whose parents had stolen her medical practice using forged power of attorney documents. A software engineer in Colorado whose family had gained control of his company through fake mental health commitments. A restaurant owner in Florida whose relatives had transferred her business assets using fraudulent court orders. The total estimated theft across all Walsh's cases exceeds $3 million. Your situation was actually one of the smaller operations, but it provided the evidence we needed to uncover the entire network. The investigation had also revealed international connections. Walsh's organization had been working with criminal networks in other countries to launder stolen money and create false identities for family members who wanted to disappear after completing their thefts. Your cousin Derek wasn't just providing technical support for spying on you. He was running cybersecurity operations for the entire criminal network, helping them monitor victims and avoid law enforcement detection. Derek had been arrested at his apartment that morning, where agents found computer equipment containing surveillance data on over 60 families across multiple states. His technical expertise had enabled the criminal network to operate with sophistication that had allowed them to avoid detection for years. But the most shocking revelation involved the corruption of legitimate institutions. Walsh's network had infiltrated family court systems, psychiatric hospitals, and financial institutions across 7 states. They had judges, social workers, doctors, and bank officials who were actively participating in the fraud operations. The corrupt judge, Michelle Rodriguez, who was supposed to hear my custody case, had been taking bribes to approve fraudulent mental health commitments and asset transfers. The fake doctor, Elizabeth Warren, was actually a disgraced psychiatrist who had lost her license but continued practicing under false credentials provided by Walsh's network. We estimate that over 200 families have been affected by this corruption network over the past 5 years. The financial and emotional damage to victims and their children is incalculable. As Agent Chen explained the scope of the criminal enterprise, I realized that my parents' betrayal was part of something far more evil than simple family greed. They had participated in a systematic destruction of families that had torn apart hundreds of lives and stolen millions of dollars from victims who had trusted the wrong people. But their participation in this network was about to become their complete downfall. Every victim they had created was now evidence in a federal case that would send the entire criminal organization to prison for decades. The money they had stolen from me was just the beginning of what they would lose. Federal asset forfeiture laws would allow victims to recover funds from every account, property, and asset that the criminal network had accumulated through their years of fraud. Justice was finally coming for families who had been destroyed by people they trusted most. Monday morning's custody hearing became the final act in the most devastating legal trap I had ever witnessed. Judge Maria Santos, who had replaced the corrupt Michelle Rodriguez over the weekend, following her arrest, presided over proceedings that my parents still believed would grant them custody of Emily and complete control over my life. Thomas Walsh, unaware that his communications had been monitored by the FBI for weeks, confidently presented his case with the false evidence and coached witnesses that had been so carefully prepared. What he didn't know was that Judge Santos had been briefed by federal prosecutors and was fully aware that she was observing the commission of multiple felonies in real time. Your Honor. Walsh began with the smooth confidence of someone who believed he controlled the courtroom. The evidence clearly demonstrates that Miss Patterson is suffering from severe postpartum psychosis that renders her unable to provide adequate care for her infant daughter. He presented the fabricated medical reports from the fake Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the forged financial documents showing my supposed irresponsible spending, and the carefully coordinated witness statements from family members claiming to have observed my mental deterioration. My parents sat in the front row wearing expressions of fake concern and parental worry, playing their roles as loving grandparents forced to protect their grandchild from a mentally unstable mother. Patricia dabbed at her eyes with tissues, while Frank nodded solemnly at each piece of false evidence Walsh presented. Furthermore, Walsh continued, Miss Patterson has been exhibiting increasingly paranoid behavior, making false accusations against family members who are simply trying to provide support during her crisis. These delusions include claims that her loving parents have somehow stolen money from her accounts. Judge Santos listened impassively as Walsh presented document after document of fabricated evidence. The fake psychiatric evaluations, the forged bank statements, the falsified witness testimonies, and the fraudulent property transfer documents were all being entered into evidence where they would become permanent documentation of federal crimes. When Walsh called his first witness, my Aunt Carol took the stand and delivered the perjured testimony she had been coached to provide. She swore under oath that she had observed me exhibiting erratic behavior during family gatherings, making concerning statements about not wanting family involvement in Emily's care and showing signs of mental instability that worried everyone who cared about me. I've known Chanel since she was born. Carol lied smoothly, and I've never seen her behave the way she has since Emily arrived. She's become secretive, hostile, and completely unreasonable. We're all terrified about what might happen to that beautiful baby if she doesn't get professional help immediately. Uncle Stephen followed with equally perjured testimony about my supposed financial irresponsibility and emotional outbursts. Cousin Jennifer swore that I had made threatening statements about keeping Emily away from family members who wanted to help. Each witness provided false testimony that supported the mental instability narrative while being completely unaware that federal agents were documenting every word as evidence of conspiracy and perjury charges that would send them all to prison. But when Walsh called his star witness, the fake social worker Diana Thompson, everything changed. Diana approached the witness stand with the confidence of someone who had provided false testimony in dozens of similar cases. She carried a thick folder of fabricated reports and fraudulent documentation supporting the claim that Emily would be in immediate danger if she remained in my custody. As Diana was sworn in and began her testimony, FBI agents quietly entered the courtroom from multiple doors. Agent Chen positioned herself near the prosecution table, while additional agents took positions throughout the gallery. Miss Thompson. Walsh began, please tell the court about your professional evaluation of Miss Patterson's fitness as a mother. Based on my extensive investigation, Diana lied under oath. Miss Patterson exhibits clear signs of postpartum psychosis, paranoid delusions, and an inability to provide safe care for her infant daughter. I recommend immediate removal of the child and involuntary psychiatric commitment for the mother. Judge Santos leaned forward with an expression that made my heart race with anticipation. Miss Thompson, could you please state your professional license number for the court record? Diana's face went slightly pale, but she provided a number that she clearly believed would check out under routine verification. Miss Thompson, according to the State Board of Social Work, the license number you just provided belongs to someone who has been deceased for 3 years. Could you explain how you're using a dead person's professional credentials? The courtroom fell completely silent as Diana realized she had been caught in a devastating lie under oath in front of a federal judge. Judge Santos continued with calm authority that made the air feel electric. Furthermore, Ms. Thompson, federal investigators have informed this court that you are currently under indictment for conspiracy fraud and providing false testimony in family court proceedings. You are not a licensed social worker, and every report you have submitted to this court is fraudulent. At that moment, Agent Chen stood and displayed her FBI credentials. Your Honor, we have arrest warrants for Diana Thompson, Thomas Walsh, Frank Patterson, Patricia Patterson, and all other individuals who have provided false testimony in these proceedings. The eruption in the courtroom was immediate and chaotic. My parents jumped to their feet in shock and panic, while Walsh frantically gathered his papers as if he could somehow escape the legal disaster unfolding around him. All evidence submitted by the respondents in this case has been determined to be fraudulent, Judge Santos announced. Every witness statement, every medical report, every financial document, and every professional evaluation presented to this court is fake and was created as part of a federal criminal conspiracy. FBI agents moved through the courtroom with precise efficiency, placing handcuffs on Walsh, Diana Thompson, and each family member who had provided false testimony. The charges were read clearly for the court record: conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, identity theft, and obstruction of justice. Patricia's facade finally cracked completely as federal agents led her away. This is impossible. We had everything planned perfectly. How did they know? Agent Chen's response was heard clearly throughout the courtroom. Mrs. Patterson, your daughter has been cooperating with a federal investigation into your criminal activities for the past week. Every confession you made, every crime you committed, and every law you violated has been recorded as evidence for your prosecution. As the handcuffs clicked into place around my parents' wrists, Judge Santos delivered the final judgment that would protect Emily and me forever. Custody of Emily Patterson is awarded permanently to her mother, Chanel Patterson. All claims by the respondents are dismissed with prejudice, and this court finds that their petition was filed with malicious intent as part of a criminal conspiracy. The custody hearing that was supposed to destroy my life had instead become the courtroom documentation of my parents' complete legal and criminal downfall. The federal asset forfeiture process that began immediately after my parents' arrests revealed the true scope of the financial empire they had built using stolen money from dozens of victims. What I discovered during the recovery proceedings exceeded my worst fears about their criminal activities and provided resources for justice that I never could have imagined. Agent Chen called me 2 weeks after the arrest with news that transformed my understanding of everything my parents had done over the past 5 years. Chanel, the forensic accounting team, has completed their analysis of all accounts connected to your parents' criminal network. The total assets we've seized exceed $2.4 million. The seized assets included bank accounts in 7 states, real estate properties purchased with stolen money, luxury vehicles, jewelry, artwork, and investment portfolios that had been built using funds taken from victims who trusted my parents because of my professional reputation. Your parents used the money they stole from you and your identity to establish themselves as successful investment managers. They convinced people that they were managing funds on your behalf and used your professional credentials to gain access to retirement accounts, inheritance funds, and life savings from over 60 families. The recovery process revealed properties I never knew existed. A vacation house in Colorado purchased with money stolen from my grandmother's assisted living fund. A luxury condominium in Florida bought using funds taken from elderly neighbors who thought they were investing in my consulting business. A yacht registered in my name but purchased entirely with money stolen from family friends. Federal law allows victims of organized fraud to recover damages not just from their own stolen funds, but from the entire criminal enterprise's assets. Since your identity was central to most of their fraud operations, you're entitled to a significant portion of the recovered funds. The financial recovery exceeded $428,000 directly returned to my accounts, representing not only my stolen money, but also punitive damages from the criminal enterprise's other assets. But more importantly, the seized funds allowed the Federal Victims Compensation Program to provide restitution to every person my parents had defrauded over the years. Your grandmother will receive full restitution of the $28,000 your parents stole from her, plus additional compensation for emotional distress. Mrs. Dorothy Williams will recover her entire life savings, and Uncle Robert will get back the money he lost in their fake real estate scheme. The victim's restitution process became an unexpected source of healing for our entire extended family network. People who had been too embarrassed to admit they had been scammed began coming forward with their stories revealing the full scope of manipulation and betrayal that my parents had inflicted on everyone who trusted them. But the most meaningful aspect of the financial recovery was the establishment of Emily's Protection Fund. Using my recovered assets and additional compensation from the Federal Victims Fund, I created an irrevocable trust that would provide for Emily's education, healthcare, and future security. The trust was designed with multiple layers of legal protection to ensure that no family member or outside party could ever access or manipulate Emily's resources. The trust structure we've established, explained the federal attorney handling victim compensation, creates protections that go far beyond normal inheritance planning. Even if someone attempted to use false custody claims or fraudulent legal documents, they would be unable to access any of Emily's funds. The trust included provisions for independent oversight by professional trustees, annual audits by certified public accountants, and legal protections that would automatically trigger federal investigation if anyone attempted to interfere with Emily's financial security. Within 6 weeks of my parents' arrests, I had not only recovered everything they had stolen, but had established financial security for Emily that exceeded anything I could have achieved through normal career advancement alone. The federal investigation also led to the recovery of stolen property and funds from Walsh's entire criminal network. Other victims received restitution that allowed them to rebuild their lives after years of financial devastation caused by people they had trusted. The total restitution paid to all victims in this case exceeds $3.2 million, Agent Chen explained. Your cooperation with our investigation made it possible to recover assets and provide justice to families who thought they would never see their money again. But beyond the financial recovery, the federal prosecution had created legal precedents that would protect other families from similar crimes in the future. New federal legislation is being developed based on evidence from this case, Agent Chen told me. The Walsh investigation revealed gaps in family court oversight and financial institution monitoring that allowed this criminal network to operate for years without detection. The financial recovery process took 4 months to complete, but by winter, Emily and I had moved into a beautiful new home in a safe neighborhood far from the toxic family dynamics that had nearly destroyed our lives. The house was purchased outright with recovered funds and placed in Emily's trust, ensuring that we would always have secure housing regardless of any future challenges. As I watched Emily take her first steps in our new living room, surrounded by the security and peace that justice had provided, I realized that my parents' attempt to steal our future had instead created the foundation for a life more secure and independent than anything I could have built alone. Their greed had become Emily's protection. Their betrayal had become our liberation. The criminal trial of my parents and their co-conspirators began 8 months after their arrests and became a public spectacle that exposed the complete moral bankruptcy of people I had once trusted and loved. As the federal prosecutors presented their case, family members who had participated in the conspiracy began turning against each other with a savagery that revealed the true nature of their relationships. The trial's first major revelation came when my brother Jake took the witness stand as a cooperating witness for the federal prosecution. His testimony destroyed any remaining illusions about family loyalty or misguided good intentions. "I knew it was all fake from the beginning," Jake admitted under oath, his voice barely audible in the packed courtroom. "Mom and Dad told me they were planning to take Emily away from Chanel and steal all her money. They said she was too successful for her own good and needed to be brought down." Jake's testimony revealed that he had secretly recorded many of the family planning sessions because he thought it was entertaining to watch their elaborate schemes develop. His phone contained hours of audio evidence where my parents, Walsh, and various family members discussed the most effective ways to destroy my mental health, steal my assets, and eliminate my ability to resist their control. They used to joke about how easy it was to manipulate Chanel because she trusted family. Jake continued, tears streaming down his face as he realized the enormity of what he had participated in. "Dad said she was stupid for working so hard when they could just take everything she earned anyway." The recordings Jake provided were played in open court, allowing everyone present to hear my parents laughing about their plans to have me committed to a psychiatric facility while they liquidated everything I owned. My sister Madison's testimony was even more devastating. She had been recruited as a witness against me, but eventually broke down and confessed the full scope of the family's coordinated deception. "Patricia and Frank made all of us practice our testimony for weeks," Madison sobbed as she described the coaching sessions. "They told us exactly what to say to make Chanel look crazy and unfit. They said if we didn't cooperate, they would cut us off financially and turn the whole family against us." Madison revealed that the expensive jewelry she had received was actually a bribe payment for her participation in the false testimony. My parents had paid various family members thousands of dollars to provide statements supporting the mental instability narrative. "I never believed Chanel was mentally ill," Madison admitted. "She was the most stable person in our family, and Emily was perfectly cared for. But Mom and Dad convinced us that Chanel owed us money because she was more successful than everyone else." The trial also exposed the manipulation of extended family members who had genuinely believed they were helping during a crisis. Aunt Carol broke down completely when she learned that the Disney World vacation I had supposedly funded was actually paid for with money stolen from my grandmother's assisted living fund. "I thought Chanel had offered to pay for the trip as a generous gesture," Carol testified through tears. "If I had known they were stealing from their own mother to make me think Chanel was being generous, I would never have participated in anything they asked me to do." Uncle Stephen's testimony revealed the sophisticated psychological manipulation my parents had used to recruit family members for their conspiracy. Frank and Patricia spent months convincing everyone that Chanel had become arrogant and selfish since her career became successful, Stephen explained. "They said she was planning to cut off the entire family and that we needed to band together to protect Emily from her mother's ambition and instability." The family members who had provided false affidavits began publicly apologizing and offering to make restitution for their participation in the fraud. Several relatives established funds to help cover my legal expenses and provide additional security for Emily's future. But the most shocking testimony came from my cousin Derek, who revealed the technical sophistication of the surveillance operation that had been monitoring my life for over a year. "I designed the spyware to capture everything Chanel did on her devices," Derek admitted. "Banking passwords, personal communications, work emails, medical information, everything. Patricia and Frank wanted complete access to her digital life so they could plan their thefts and monitor whether she was becoming suspicious." Derek's testimony revealed that my parents had been reading my private communications with doctors about Emily's development, accessing my work emails about confidential client matters, and monitoring my personal relationships to identify any potential threats to their plans. They used the surveillance to time their thefts perfectly, Derek explained. They knew exactly when Chanel received bonus payments, when she transferred money between accounts, and when she would be too busy with work or Emily to notice unusual transactions. As each family member testified about their role in the conspiracy, it became clear that my parents had created a criminal organization that systematically exploited every relationship of trust and love that should have provided protection and support. The trial proceedings were covered extensively by local media, creating a public record of family betrayal that shocked the community and prompted other families to come forward with similar stories of relatives who had stolen assets using false mental health claims and fraudulent custody petitions. By the end of the testimony phase, my parents sat alone at the defense table, abandoned by everyone who had once participated in their schemes. The family unity they had claimed to be protecting had been completely destroyed by the revelation of their true motives and methods. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all federal charges. The evidence had been so overwhelming and the testimony so damaging that there was no possibility of acquittal or reduced charges. As the verdicts were read, I looked at my parents for the last time and felt something I hadn't expected: pity. They had destroyed not only my trust, but the relationships with every family member who had once loved and respected them. Their greed had cost them everything that should have mattered most. The family reckoning was complete. Justice had been served, and Emily and I were finally free to build a life surrounded by people who understood the difference between love and exploitation. The sentencing hearing 3 months later brought final justice to a criminal conspiracy that had devastated multiple families and stolen millions of dollars from people who had trusted the wrong relatives. Federal Judge Richard Chen delivered sentences that would ensure my parents and their co-conspirators would spend the remainder of their productive years in federal prison. Patricia Patterson received 15 years in federal prison for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, and child endangerment. The judge noted that her role as the primary coordinator of the family's criminal activities and her manipulation of Emily's welfare for financial gain warranted the maximum sentence available under federal sentencing guidelines. Frank Patterson was sentenced to 12 years for his participation in the financial fraud and property theft conspiracy. His sentence was reduced slightly due to his cooperation in providing information about other criminal networks, but Judge Chen emphasized that his violation of parental trust made his crimes particularly heinous. Thomas Walsh received 20 years in federal prison for operating a criminal enterprise that had defrauded families across 7 states. The evidence revealed that Walsh's organization had stolen over $4 million from victims and corrupted numerous judicial and medical professionals who had facilitated the fraudulent custody and mental health proceedings. The corrupt social worker Diana Thompson was sentenced to 8 years for providing false testimony and creating fraudulent reports that endangered children's welfare. Derek received 6 years for his role in the cybersecurity crimes and surveillance operations that had enabled the entire criminal network. But beyond the criminal sentences, the federal restitution orders created lasting financial consequences that would follow my parents for the rest of their lives. The defendants are jointly and severally liable for $867,000 in restitution to victims, Judge Chen announced. This obligation will continue beyond their prison sentences and will be collected from any future income, inheritance, or assets they may acquire. The restitution orders meant that my parents would never again be able to accumulate wealth or property that could provide them with comfort or security. Every dollar they earned after their release would be subject to garnishment for victim compensation. More importantly, the federal convictions created permanent legal barriers that would protect Emily and me from any future contact or manipulation attempts. The defendants are permanently prohibited from any direct or indirect contact with minor child Emily Patterson. Judge Chen continued, this prohibition includes physical contact communications through third parties, attempts to establish legal relationships, and any efforts to influence the child's care, education, or welfare. The protection order also extended to my financial and professional life. My parents were forbidden from using my name, professional credentials, or identity for any purpose. Any future attempts to access my accounts, claim relationship to my business activities, or interfere with my career would result in additional federal charges. As the sentencing concluded, I felt a profound sense of closure and liberation. The people who had given me life had chosen to destroy that life for financial gain. But their betrayal had led to a justice so complete that Emily and I would never again have to fear their manipulation or control. 6 months after the sentencing, Emily and I had settled into a life that exceeded my best dreams for our future. We lived in a beautiful home, in a safe neighborhood, surrounded by friends and neighbors who provided genuine support and community. Emily's trust fund would ensure her education and security well into adulthood, protected by legal structures that no family member could ever penetrate or manipulate. My career had flourished as news of the case established my reputation as someone who could detect and combat sophisticated financial fraud. The consulting firm promoted me to senior partner and created a specialized division focusing on family financial crimes with me as the directing partner. Most importantly, Emily was thriving in an environment free from the toxic family dynamics that had nearly destroyed her future. At 18 months old, she was reaching every developmental milestone, perfectly surrounded by love and stability that would provide the foundation for whatever life she chose to build. The investigation that began with my parents' betrayal had led to federal legislation strengthening protections for families targeted by relatives who attempted to use fraudulent mental health claims for financial gain. The Emily Protection Act required additional oversight of family court proceedings involving mental health evaluations and created federal criminal penalties for family members who filed false custody petitions. On a sunny afternoon in spring, I watched Emily take confident steps across our back garden, chasing butterflies and laughing with pure joy. The child my parents had tried to use as leverage for their crimes was now a symbol of resilience and hope who would grow up protected by the justice system they had tried to corrupt. Their perfect crime had become the perfect foundation for our perfect freedom. As I reflected on the journey from betrayal to justice, I realized that sometimes the most devastating attacks come from people who know exactly how to hurt us most deeply. But I also learned that truth and determination can overcome even the most sophisticated deceptions when we refuse to surrender to people who mistake our love for weakness. Emily's laughter filled our garden as she discovered the simple joy of chasing soap bubbles I was blowing for her entertainment. Her happiness was built on a foundation of security that no one could ever take away, protected by legal structures that had been forged in the fire of her grandparents' greed and cruelty. The story that began with a shocking betrayal at a family party had ended with justice healing and the promise of a future where love would never again be weaponized against the people who deserved protection most. Have you ever experienced a situation where family members betrayed your trust for financial gain? How do you think families can protect themselves from relatives who might exploit their success or vulnerability? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Thank you so much for following Emily's and my journey from betrayal to justice. Your support means everything to families who are fighting to protect their children from people who should be providing love and security instead of exploitation and manipulation. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to stay connected with stories of resilience and justice. and share this with anyone who might need to know that even the most devastating family betrayals can be overcome with determination and the right support systems. May your families be filled with genuine love, honest relationships, and the kind of trust that builds strength instead of creating vulnerability.